Hello guys, today we will be talking about the Steyr AUG assault rifle. So first get the history out of the way. We need to keep in mind that this gun was accepted the armament of Austrian army in 1977, so that's a long time ago. The first sample being delivered in 1978. So when you look side by side the FNFAL and the Steyr AUG, you really see the huge leap in technology. Pretty much the same leap like when we look at Walther P1, which is basically P38 pistol, that got replaced by Glock 17 in Austria as well. As you can see, this is bullpup design. French around the same time did pretty much the same with their FAMAS. Little bit later, the British with their L85 also bullpup design as well. So this is pretty much the vibe of that period. This gun introduced really a lot of innovation. So the bullpup design, that's obvious. Then we have the short stroke gas piston. We also have the progressive trigger, integrated optic. Now, what is the history of the Steyr AUGs in Ukraine? You might be actually a little bit surprised, but Ukraine is the country of bullpup, because not only Steyr AUG, but also we had the entire Ford 200 series, which was just a licensed copy of the Tavor TAR-21, also X95 and X95 in 9mm Luger, also later bullpup variant of the AKD Malyuk. But now we coming back to the Steyr AUG. If you remember, between let's say 2000 till 2010, there was this very weird push in all the counterterrorism forces in Europe that they started to get Steyr AUGs, and it doesn't really matter what variant, but many forces adopted just a few pieces, some in 9mm Luger, some in 5.56. And our domestic MVS Sokil, which is basically an analog of a SWAT unit, adopted Steyr AUG H-bar, so that's the light machine gun variant, and already in the pictures from 2009, but I believe they adopted it actually way before that, let's say like 2002, and truly they were using Steyr AUG side by side with PKM and AKMs. I worked personally with the MVS Sokil only once, and that was in the 24th of January of 2015, when the Russians got an idea to fire Grad in the middle of the civilian market. So it was like one big crisis with 30 dead, over 100 wounded, and on the ground I actually met guys from this unit, and from what I've seen they were very knowledgeable, especially their EOD guy. Later, we talking 2015-16, this entire unit was reformed, and the new name for the Sokil is Cord. So all our Cord units and Cord actually now have even own brigade that is fighting on the front line, where once upon a time the MVS Sokil. Also, Sokil allegedly killed Alexander Muzichko, Seshko Bieli, which was one of our well-known figures that actually fought the Russians already back in Chechnya. The official version is that he killed himself during the raid, but we will never know. Aside from government structures, there are actually few users of the Steyr AUG-Zs. The most notable one is Dmytro Korchinsky in 2014-15. He was commanding the Santa Maria Battalion. Currently, he is, let's say, ideological leader of the Bratstvo unit under GUR.
Не вдалося потрапити в голову.
Also, I found one interesting picture, and that's from raid of Russian forces in the south of Ukraine, and they basically seized also one variant of 9mm Steyr AUG. I believe this is civilian variant, but you could see that that person was collecting guns, was collecting expensive guns, and when the Russians invaded, he just decided to dug them down in the ground. So before we start, we need to talk about this concrete example. This is the typical A1 variant. This is by far the most common variant around the world. And we can see the long barrel. I believe it's around 20 inches. And then we have the stock. The stock is quite unusual because this one is supposed to take AR15 magazines. So you can't put the normal Steyr AUG mag into this one. Also, this is the very first model of this type of stock. Later they made some upgrades to it. So this is the tulip muzzle device. Also sometimes you can see it open toward the end, so it's basic free prone muzzle device as well, but this one is more common. Also we can see the friction ring for use of the rifle grenades. Then we can see the bayonet lock. Talking about bayonets, here is the segment. Let's talk briefly about the bayonets for the Steyr AUGs. This is of course not the correct one. This is actually for the Canadian C7 AR15 pattern rifle. What is common disinformation is that the actual bayonet for the Steyr AUG is the Glock Field Knife 78. That's actually not true, but only partially. So, the official bayonet for the Steyr AUGs generally, it's by Acorn in Germany, and it's called KCB 77. Same 77 like the year of acceptance, like the actually STG 77, the official Austrian name for the Steyr AUG in the Austrian army. But also there was a second competitor for the same contract, and that knife was called Zeitler 77. And when you look side by side at Zeitler 77 and the Glock field knife, it's obvious that they are pretty much the same one, although made by two different companies, but Glock took very heavy inspiration from that one. There are actually pictures on the internet of the adapter for the bayonet that can technically accept the Glock field knife or the Zeitler 77, but that adapter it's actually very rare and it only underwent few trials but never really become fielded in any army. The official pattern, like the interface, let's say, it's the same like on the American M7 bayonet. So you can call it the standard NATO pattern of bayonets. All of them can be accepted on this rifle. When the countries that adopted the Steyr AUG didn't accept it, also the KCB 77, what they did was just to take basic M7 bayonet, American one, and just fit it on. For example, the Australians that also have by far the most developed version of the Steyr AUG currently in their armament use the M9 bayonet, which is the same interface, just more modern bayonet. Since we have here also Acorn bayonet, also the M7 pattern interface, we can fit it without any problem also on this example of Steyr AUG, like so, lock in solidly and works just great. Modification that we also did on the Steyr AUGs over the years was to create flat top receivers. So basically what you do is that you cut off this top portion and just weld on a rail. I also had a little bit of a laugh because I've seen guys in Idlib and what they did with their Saudi provided Steyr AUGs was exactly the same flat top modification, and just after that you can put on pretty much any red dot, any scopes, so that's definitely one way how you can do it as well. So this is the standard NATO stock. You can see that you have the magazine release right here, but you can also just press the button right here. This is the M1 pattern, so there is no bolt release. The bolt releases on the later patterns are actually placed here. When we look side by side with Steyr AUG stock that look like this one and the original magazine use just the catch on the rear side of the magazine right here. Those original AUG magazines that have actually the little hook on the spine of the back, exactly the index on this catch. When you put them in some modern pouch like this that have this rim, they really like to catch on the rim of the mag pouch by that hook, which seems very minor, but it was driving me completely insane when using the AUGs with original magazines. What we need to keep in mind is that the original Steyr AUG magazine, it's extremely reliable and it's great design, and we also need to respect that it's made out of polymer already in the year 77, so long before any Magpul PMAG, for example, was developed. Then we go further back. Here we have the gas piston that is actually very short. And here we have the gas plug and also the setting. We have normal setting and adverse setting for this concrete type of rifle. And generally all of the guns that I handled that had the M4 stocks, I always needed to use the adverse setting, the more open setting, so more gas get into the system and I don't get cycling problems. Then we have the foldable front grip that look like so. I heard from some Austrian SF guys that they basically handle the gun like this. So it's a little bit more AR style. I just don't think that's correct. I believe that you should always have the gun set it up the same if you intend to fire 2 shots or 300 shots. I always prefer to have the handle unfolded immediately and don't use any technique that I would have the gun AR15 style for like 5 shots. Then it gets too hot and only then I'm unfolding. I don't think that's correct. Anyway, the front grip, it's a little bit wobbly and it's really necessary because this gun tends to get hot pretty quickly. This is quite obvious because you have a receiver right here and you have the hot barrel going through it. So this entire metal section tends to get really hot. So it's good to have the handle here and basically to learn yourself how to use it properly, because I don't use vertical grips on any other guns, but it's actually quite good to mitigate the recoil. Also, technique that you can use is that you hold the gun the same like the Tavor, for example, which is quite natural for me because I had Tavor before as well. And in that case, you basically hold the gun just like this. So now we get to the optical device on top. This gun have integrated optic. I basically seen 3 variants of the reticle. One is just a donut, just a ring. Then you also have donut but with cross. And then also in some rare examples you have just plain cross, which is very accurate but little bit less quick, less intuitive. Also the magnification, it's only 1.5 times, so basically no magnification at all. Also the field of view, it's quite narrow, let's say. Also the optic have actually integrated mechanical sights on top that are non-adjustable, but they will guide you a little bit. And now we getting to the favorite part of everybody, and that's accessories. With A1 variant with integrated optic, your only option pretty much is the claw gear. It's a clamshell type of design, and it just basically attach on top of the optic, around the optic like so. It's all plastic, just removable aluminum rails on the sides, so you can definitely do that. And this is the only way how to put red dot on the gun. So you can here see I put it aimpoint comp M5 and aimpoint comp, this small variant, or for example the micro are the best options, I think. Also, since we don't have adjustable stock, I believe that because of the unlimited eye relief, and if you are not that well trained on the system, it's much better to have red dot, because it doesn't really matter how close or how far you will hold the gun, how it will end up shouldered on your plate carrier, you will always see the dot, so that's cool. Also, you really need to take into account the high overbore, but definitely it's doable. You need to practice a little bit, check some data, and then you can make hits absolutely no problem. Only on very short distances you need to be really careful on the offset of the sights. Then I have Surefire on the left and laser aiming module on the right. Of course, the immediate problem is how you would actually activate those. So this is something that I come up with years ago, and that's that you take the Unity tabs and you basically just attach piece of Velcro on side of the gun and put the buttons right there. What that does is that you pretty much hold the rifle like the Tavor, and you can very easily activate both of those. You can even activate both in the same time in case that you're using visible light and visible laser, so it's quite doable. Also, when you work from the second shoulder, you can still handle the buttons no problem. So it's by far not ideal option, but it's doable and it works. Since the gun is just borrowed from another structure, I can't of course do stuff that I would do in case that I need to use the gun myself. So when the gun gets actually very hot, the glue sometimes might fail, like this intersection might detach, but there is enough metal in the receiver that you can actually drill 2 holes on the Unity tabs and basically screw it in. Of course, you need to do it with some experience because you have working parts inside the receiver, right? But it's something that you do, and the location of the buttons here is quite slick and work actually quite good for me. Now let's just mention swing swivels. So here we have the front one. It tends to rotate, right? And then you have your sling always twisted. So it's good to put 2 zip ties like so. So you basically have a rigid attaching point for your sling. With the rear one, it's not that much of an issue, but I just prefer to attach the sling from the other side, not from this left side. Also, the cable management, when you use zip ties, you get very little snag hazard. Of course, if this was my duty gun, I would put more zip ties on the laser aiming modules, also on the red dot mount, so it really become one solid package. Then I have the sights inside the optic. I always just use the covers, and it's basically just as backup sight. And what is quite handy, when you have the original optic actually zeroed, Then you just put red dot on top and you basically don't need to shoot. You just zero the top optic on the lower one. Of course, then when you're thinking offset and about hits on longer distances, you need to make some adjustments and some math. Then we have the Crossbolt Safety, which seems very intuitive. It is intuitive, it's always there, but you will be always slower than on AR15. In real life, it doesn't really matter. Of course, in case that you want to do some sport shooting, it might marginally matter. But here it's always one movement to put the safety off, and only then you press the trigger. On most modern guns, it's your thumb basically doing the work on the safety, and your trigger finger can already go on the trigger, so it's a little bit faster. But absolutely not an issue, and it's very intuitive. Then probably the best upgrade for any AUG, this is the Corvus Defensio breast deflector. Also there are some other design, there is also design from the Steyr themselves. It doesn't really matter. It's just that you can very easily shoot it from left shoulder, so when you're taking cover and you're taking corner to the left, you can have your body nicely covered, take your sector, and it's cool. You don't really need to leap from the corner like so in case that you don't actually have the breast deflector, because usually the direction of the breast it's somewhere there toward the back, toward your face. So that's a little bit of a disadvantage. But there are aftermarket solutions for this, but of course they are extremely expensive. Now we go toward the front again, and this is one of the biggest talking points on the internet, and that's the Steyr AUG trigger. Look, it's not good at all. This is one of the triggers when you shoot normal assault rifles like AR15s, brand 2s. Then you take Steyr AUG, you press on the trigger, and you really believe that you didn't put the safety off because it's so stiff, the trigger. The characteristics are not that great, but this is assault rifle, and in assault rifle terms it's absolutely doable, it's no problem at all. The marksman variant of Steyr AUGs were never really successful. Of course there are a ton of aftermarket solutions, also there are little tips and tricks how to actually make even the factory trigger a little bit better. So it's absolutely not problem for me, especially with some training, with some rounds. You really learn the characteristic of the trigger and it's no problem. What might be actually problem is the progressive trigger. So it means that you press a little bit for single shot and that you press all in for full auto. But the trigger is actually quite readable, but during the lifespan of those guns and the different variants, it actually became a problem. So they came up with a variety of solutions. One of them was little device that basically you either put on or off. When it was on, it just physically didn't allow the trigger to reach the end for the full auto. Then you just click it aside and you could actually squeeze all the way for full auto. But most of us will be only handling this A1 variant, so that's that. Now talking the trigger and trigger pack, that is right here. It's very easily interchangeable. And the variants that I see, you could actually choose the fire modes. So of course you had full auto, but then you had little lever on the trigger pack, the same here. And with flipping the red lever, you either had 3-round burst, so the gun became single shot and 3-round burst, that's it. Or when you flipped the red lever inside the trigger mechanism, you had full auto. So then you had single shot and full auto weapon. So this is just a testament of the modularity of this entire system. Also, I believe there were some variants that were 3-round burst and full auto in the same time, no single shot, but I can't really confirm it. It's just something that I've seen in the literature. So let's now address the elephant in the room, and that's the AR15 variant of the stock. So never guys get this one. I believe that yes, they for sure with the more modern version that actually have even bolt release, and that lot of guys have those guns that work correctly, of course. But this gun doesn't give really any sense in modern day and age, especially for you if you are civilian and you're buying the civilian variant. If you are performance focused, of course you get AR15, you don't think about anything else. If you just want to spend money, just because of spend money, definitely buy Steyr AUGs, but go all the way. Also buy the Steyr AUG variant of the magazines, don't buy this M4 one. Because this very first variant don't have actually bolt hold open, So every single time when you change the magazine, first you have click, then you change the mag, then you charge the weapon again. All this, it's quite stiff. You need to be quite violent with putting the full magazines in. Of course, you can do the open bolt design technique that you first pull the bolt into the rear, lock it, put the full mag, and then drop the bolt. It's up to you. It's definitely doable. But when I tried in this AR15 setup any metal magazines, they just doesn't work. It's of course not a surprise because this entire gun was designed to use the polymer magazines, and the original Steyr AUG magazines are actually quite good. Also, what I had really big success with was the Magpul variant of the Steyr AUG magazine, basically PMAG for Steyr AUG. Those work absolutely fantastic. Also, in this variant, the Magpul magazines work the best, especially the Gen 3 PMAGs. When you use the EMAG, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. So what's the answer? It's Steyr AUG a good weapon. Well, I believe it's fantastic weapon, but the main point being is that when anybody asking me what assault rifle is the best, the answer is very simple. The gun that you served with the longest, or that you did your basic training with. Because the gun that you shoot it the biggest amount of ammunition through, you are the most confident with it. So let's say that we would get Aussie soldier here and offer him Steyr AUG. He would know immediately because in his career he fired, let's say, 50,000 rounds through it, right? But when you give him, for example, AK, he might have problem. Yes, of course. The same with me. I will never run any gun better than AK-74. For simple reason, because for years I shoot AK-74 and I shoot tens of thousands through it, right? But then you give me something like this and I start to have problems. So Steyr AUG is fantastic, proven weapon. We know that Australians using it to this day, but it's on its way out. For example, the New Zealanders, they opted for AR15 Variant as well. So I believe the time of Steyr AUGs and generally bullpup types of weapons, it's slowly disappearing. Pretty much the AR15, it's the absolute winner from all the contenders. When we look objectively at all the design features and all the armies around the world, pretty much all of them ending up with AR15 derivatives. So thank you very much guys for watching. If you wish to support us, you can use the PayPal link down below or become YouTube member for extra videos.